Dust swirled across the parched Texas land, rolling like smoke over the hills that framed the tiny town of Hollow Ridge. It was the kind of place where whispers carried faster than the wind, where everyone knew everyone's sin, and where forgiveness was rarer than rain. Inside a leaning farmhouse at the edge of the town lived a girl who had stopped looking at her reflection months ago. She wasn't like the other girls, slim, fair, with bright bonnets and prettier lies. No, she was heavy, her frame thick and round, her cheeks always flushed from the strain of carrying herself. Her name wasn't often spoken kindly, and when it was, it carried pity or mockery. But tonight she wasn't crying because of the town's gossip. She was crying because she was pregnant, and the father, a drifter who had promised her forever, had vanished into the dust, leaving her with nothing but a growing belly and an unbearable shame. Her father, old Grant McCall, had once been a proud rancher, a man whose handshake meant something, whose cattle roamed far enough to be seen from the next county. But pride was a fragile thing, and when his daughter's disgrace became the talk of every saloon and sewing circle, that pride turned to rage. He didn't see a frightened daughter anymore. He saw humiliation. "You brought shame to my name," he spat one morning, his voice hoarse with anger and whiskey. "You've ruined this house, girl. Ain't no man will want you now, and I won't have you birthing that bastard here." His words cut deeper than any knife, and she shrank under the weight of them. She wanted to scream that love had fooled her, that she had believed in the promises whispered under the stars. But her father wasn't listening. He had already decided her fate. 2 days later, a wagon rolled into the yard. It creaked under the size of the man who drove it, an enormous cowboy, shoulders as wide as a barn door, hat low over his scarred face, and eyes as cold as iron. The people called him Bear, not just because of his size, but because of the way he lived, alone, wild, and feared. He'd worked the cattle trails for years, and rumors said he'd once killed a man with his bare hands. Grant met him at the porch, shaking the man's hand like sealing a deal at an auction. "She's in the house," Grant said. "Take her, feed her. Do whatever you want. Just don't bring her back." The girl stood frozen by the window, her heart collapsing in her chest as the giant cowboy's gaze lifted to her face. There was no cruelty there, only silence. And something unreadable, something heavy, as if he carried his own pain in his massive frame. When he spoke, his voice rumbled low like distant thunder. "I ain't taking her for fun, old man. I don't trade in people," Grant sneered. "You're getting a roof cattle and a woman who eats like one too. It's a fair deal." The cowboy's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. The girl, trembling, packed her few things in silence. As the wagon rolled away, she didn't look back. Her father stood on the porch, arms crossed, face turned to stone. She'd been traded like cattle, and her heart broke a little more with every turn of the wheel. The journey was long and silent. The cowboy didn't speak much, and when he did, it was only to ask if she was thirsty or cold. His ranch sat far from town, a lonely stretch of land framed by pine and river. When they arrived, she expected to be thrown into labor or servitude, but instead, he pointed to a cabin beside his own and said simply, "That's yours, rest, eat, no one here will touch you." She stared at him, confused. Why did you take me?" He paused, then looked at her the way men rarely did, with honesty. "Your pa said you needed someone to keep you hidden. I said I'd keep you safe instead. I don't care what the town says about you. I don't care what you look like. You just stay alive, girl. That's all." Days turned to weeks. She learned his name was Wyatt Bearson, though most never used it. He worked sunup to sundown, chopping wood, mending fences, breaking horses that no other man dared to touch. She helped in small ways, cooking, mending his shirts, feeding his animals. Slowly, the silence between them softened. She began to see the man behind the legend, the sadness in his eyes when he looked at the horizon, the way his massive hands trembled when he thought no one was watching. He carried guilt, deep and buried. One evening as they sat by the fire, she asked softly, "What did they say you did back in Hollow Ridge?" He didn't look up from his cup. "They said I killed my brother," he said. Her eyes widened. "Did you?" He shook his head. "No, but I didn't stop the man who did. Sometimes living feels worse than dying when you've got that kind of weight on your soul." Her heart ached for him. For the first time, she felt seen, not as a burden or a mistake, but as a person with worth. And as her belly grew, Wyatt began carving a crib from pine wood, his huge hands working gently as though afraid to hurt the wood. "Every child deserves a safe start," he said. She watched him, tears filling her eyes. This man, the one the world called a monster, was the first person who had ever shown her kindness. But peace doesn't last long in Hollow Ridge. One stormy night, a group of riders appeared, her father among them, drunk and bitter. "I want her back," he shouted. "The town's saying she's dead and I can't have that on my name. You give her up, Bear, or I'll burn this place down." Wyatt stepped out into the rain, towering over them, his voice calm but deadly. "She ain't yours to trade no more, old man." Grant laughed. "You think that fat girl's worth fighting for? She's a disgrace." Wyatt's fist clenched. "She's worth more than any man who'd call her that." The gunfire that followed split the night open. When it was over, her father lay wounded but alive, his men scattered. Wyatt stood breathing hard, a bullet lodged in his shoulder. She ran to him, tears streaming, her hands shaking as she tried to stop the bleeding. "Why did you do that?" she cried. He looked down at her, pain etched in every line of his face. "Because nobody stood up for me when I needed it. I won't let that happen to you." Months later, the child was born, a baby boy with eyes like his mother's and the quiet strength of the man who saved them. The town never came for her again. Some said the giant cowboy scared them off. Others said shame had turned to legend. But in that lonely cabin, surrounded by love instead of scorn, she finally learned that worth wasn't measured by a father's pride or a stranger's gossip. It was found in the people who stayed when everyone else walked away. And as the wind howled outside and her baby cooed softly in her arms, she looked at Wyatt and whispered, "You gave me my life back." He smiled, weary but warm. "No," he said quietly, "you saved mine." As the screen fades to black, the narrator's voice echoes, "If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Because every story of redemption deserves to be heard, and someone out there needs to know that love can bloom even in the darkest places."